happening right now. All the planetary alignments and all alignments of every kind are happening right now. Not just the chaotic stuff, but the opportunity to get awakened. Humanity is about to step into itself, and it's going to say enough, and it's going to go into a different realm of consciousness. As all of this chaos is developing, so will that part.
Guy here, my epic guest is Franco Romero, and wow, what a high energy podcast. I got to be honest, I really connected with Franco. We had a fabulous conversation. There is a lot in this episode, and I definitely recommend you check it out in its entirety. And he certainly has a lot to say and share around what he feels is going on the planet as we speak, and especially through 2025. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know where you are in the world. It is always wonderful to connect, as always. And of course, big year for us is Live and Flow. We'll be hosting up the retreats in Bali. We've only got a few spots left in Bali. Our Australia retreat is sold out. We are going to be in Croatia in November in Split. If you want to come and join us, it will be amazing, I promise you. And if you're in Australia, we will be up and down the country. Plus, we're going to be in NZ, but who knows? You might have missed us by then. Anyway, much love from me. Enjoy this conversation with Franco. It's awesome. Franco, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me, Guy. It's been a long time in the making, as we both were talking about before we got on. A couple of missed attempts, but we're finally here before the end of the year, right? That's all that matters. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure, mate. And I'm looking forward to diving in, because straight away it's almost the same. Before we hit the record, I could see it's all going to start coming out, our conversation, and it's like, we've got to make sure we actually record this for everyone to share.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I got a first question for you though, because I'm really keen to dive into definitely your journey and your past for sure, from what I've heard and read a little bit. But before any of that, if you were on a airplane right now and you sat next to a stranger and they ask you what you did for a living, how would you reply?
That's a great question. I actually was on a flight, and this happens all the time, actually. I'm on flights a lot these days, and inevitably somebody will ask what I wind up doing. And I know that it's not usually going to be a one sentence answer, and that would be it. But the simplest way that I kind of explain it to people is that I'm a spiritual guide or teacher, and if I don't say it that way, I usually say I do a fair amount of shamanic work as well. But I kind of sum it up typically by just kind of leaving it simple by just saying I'm a clairvoyant. So there's all sorts of different ways depending. I literally on a flight to Europe about maybe 6 months ago, I sat next to a Tibetan monk.
Wow.
Okay, so you knew that was going to be an interesting conversation, and we spent hours and hours and hours talking about all sorts of things, and it all started because, so what do you do for a living? I mean, you could tell what they were doing for a living. They were all dressed up in their outfit. So we wound up having a pretty extraordinary conversation, but it just depends on the person. But I usually kind of hit it with either one of those three things, and it usually starts a pretty lengthy conversation about something.
And do you find people are receptive? If you were that guy on the airplane before your awakening 12 years ago, or before you were leaning in, and you sat next to you that said that, how would you have responded back then? Do you know what I mean?
I love the way this is getting started already, because I've never had these kind of questions. I've had a lot of people lately that have asked really unique questions, but never one of these, hey, if you're sitting in an airplane, how is this all going to unroll? Because again, I could really feel into this. Here's the interesting thing. You asked the question, how receptive are people? The way that I sort of understand or feel into this sort of this cosmic reality, or as I call it, a spiritual game, doesn't fail that the person that sits next to me, I don't, doesn't matter where they're from, what they do in life, doesn't have to be a Tibetan monk. It is, there's never been one situation where I've sat next to somebody that they not only were receptive, but they were profoundly interested in wanting to know what this was all about. And I'm telling you, there have been people that you sit next to them and you go, nah, this isn't gonna, this is gonna be, you know, a long flight if we're gonna have a conversation. And sure enough, nope, everybody seems to be extraordinarily receptive. They'll tell you about something that they had, you know, dreams that they've had, or they've been drawn to Egyptian culture or spirituality. I mean, they you name it. It's witchery, spirituality, quantum physics, metaphysics. There hasn't been yet one time, Guy, and I've been on a lot of flights, and there hasn't been one time where somebody hasn't been receptive. And there have been a couple of times where I thought, I don't,
Yeah.
but it's sure enough, it's been extraordinarily well received. Yeah, people are really interested, and you know, the law of resonance. You're going to attract people that are going to sit next to you that are going to be extraordinarily interested in what you do. It's gotten to the point so much that at this point, I always used to bring my. I wrote a book, and I used to just bring it sometimes just to kind of do a quick read, or I'm writing my second book, and I just want to use it for reference. I usually wind up giving my book away because you know, the person next to me wants to have it, and so I give it away for, you know, for free. I just kind of sign it over. So yeah, it's well received,
How cool is
well
that? How
received.
cool is that? So,
Yeah.
so with you on your journey, then, like, I'd love to dive in a little bit. Like before you had your awakenings, were you aware of all these possibilities and these spiritual aspects of
You
life,
know,
or is it just like,
no,
no, oh,
no,
cool.
no, no,
That
no.
was me
Oh,
as well. Yeah.
dude, love these questions. Seriously, it's so refreshing. You're asking things like really,
Oh,
really that
thank
are
you.
just kind of personal, in the sense that, you know, when I wrote the book, it's called The Closet Spiritualist. I wrote it because I wanted people to understand that I was just a regular, you know, pretty much a typical guy. You know, that I didn't just pop up out of the woodwork one day and start talking about all these particular things about the metaphysical world and spiritual world. And no, I mean, I had really no sense of, of all the stuff that I talk about now today. It 10, 15 years ago. I mean, I've had experiences. I mean, a lot of the people that I talk to, a lot of the students that I have, they reach out to me because they've had paranormal or supernatural
Mm.
or metaphysical or whatever kind of experiences going back to when they were little, and they've had nobody to talk to. They've kind of you know, kept it to themselves. People have thought they were crazy. Like them, I had the same thing. I mean, I've had everything from a near death experience when I was very little, very little, to visions of that, to living in a haunted house, what I call the hauntings, for 6 years. I've I've seen things and done things, man, like, you know, because of the people you talk to and your own experiences. That for most people, it would be hard for them to wrap their arms around and really go, really. And so I've had all of those things, but it didn't really hit me until 2009, 2010, when I had a massive awakening. And what I mean by that is, literally, like with many of the people that you talk about or that you talk with, one day I'm sort of going through the motions of trying to sort out my life, like, you know, like my spiritual identity, who I am, what's all this about. And all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, I started receiving, I shouldn't say out of nowhere, I mean, I had already been receiving things, but just massive downloads of information. Downloads. I mean, just incredible stuff. All of a sudden, I'm writing stuff about quantum physics and sacred geometry and astrophysics and all sorts of stuff that I didn't have any background in.
I was just,
I didn't have any interest in it, really.
okay,
And
okay,
this is where, you know, and it turns out to be all this stuff and paranormal stuff
holy
too.
moly. So when that was happening, did you have a meditation practice, or were you leaning into things of that exploration, or were you just like walking down the streets down a vibrate thinking, what the fuck's going on here?
Pretty much, pretty
Really?
much. Yeah, so here's how it goes. I actually write about this in my book. I was having close to as close to as you can a nervous breakdown because I was really trying to figure out. There were just so many things that had happened over the course of my life that were unexplainable, and I never really felt like I could fit in. I always had these voices talking to me, the kind of stuff that you usually can maybe get hospitalized or medicated for, you know, and I couldn't make sense of it all. None of this reality made sense to me. Okay, I mean, just the basic things that people, two plus two equaling six kind of a thing, and you had to accept that kind of mentality, all the kind of things with organized religion and all sorts of. I mean, it didn't have to just be religion; it could be all sorts of stuff. Okay, my background. We were talking about this before we got on. My background was in the health and nutrition space. For many years, I consulted in that field for a long, long time, and what I was seeing just in that space alone didn't make sense in terms of the way that we were treating our bodies, the ways that the ways that the let's call it, okay, the pharmaceutical industry was not aligning properly with the way the body vibrationally operates. And that was even back then. I didn't even know what that meant, but I knew enough to know that it didn't make sense. So it wasn't just spirituality and religion. So, but I was just basically one night. I remember this, and again, I talked about this in my book. One night, I put my kids to bed, and I came upstairs to go to bed, and I totally lost it. I was just like, I couldn't handle it anymore. I was like really needing some guidance, and I literally got on my hands and knees, started crying, said, I need some sign that I'm not going
Really?
like crazy. And back in those days, this wasn't long ago, right? 12, 13, 14 years ago. This wasn't like it was common knowledge on the internet. All right, there were some books out there, yeah, sure, but the way it is now, there was nothing like that before. So you're on your own. So what happened was the next morning I woke up and I remembered so clearly nothing had happened. Nothing happened. And I remember that I was sitting there going, this is it. This is what I get for asking for this kind of stuff, some kind of a sign, anything. Within about 12 hours later, I literally was sitting at a little coffee shop, in between meetings that I was in for work, and bam, bam, I got hit. And then I had a series of more hits that happened. I had a series of hits where in that same short period of time, I'm laying in bed, and sure enough, bam, again, I get more hits. What I mean by hits is that downloads and downloads of information that I had to go downstairs, and I really shut myself out for like 2, 3 weeks, just writing and writing and writing and writing and writing. And I didn't even know what I was writing. When I came out, I had all this information about the simulation of reality, the origins of the universe. Uh, like I said, you name it, I was basically writing
Wow.
it down. But I was talking about stuff like the divine feminine and the energies of that years before I had even any clue as to what that was all about. So I spent the next 7 or 8 years, 9 years, trying to sort out all the dumping that I was getting from the higher self, if you want to call it that. And that's usually how it happens. That's how I hear this from a lot of people. I've heard so many stories about people that are just doing their life. They're having some real heavy stuff going on typically, and bam, it just hits them. And next thing they know, they're reciting something about the Akashic records or something. They had no idea that they could even talk about that stuff.
So how did
So that's how it happened with me.
wow, thank you for sharing. That's that's incredible. How did that feel? Like, so if you're in 2009 when information you can't access it like today, I know that for sure. Even, when I was really starting to look in 2014, 15, there still wasn't a great deal of conversation, or internet podcasts wasn't much of a thing. And there weren't people there to say, "Oh, you need to look this way or you need to look that way," kind of thing. So
I
when you were doing that, how did that feel? Like that energy, and how were you doing with it? Was it just a case of, was it like a liberation? Was it the sense of overwhelm, or was it inspiration? Like, how would you describe it to somebody that's not gone through that before, or is searching right now?
Well, the thing is that that's what I've been trying to do with people since then. Is I've been trying to get them kind of ready for that moment when they're going to experienced this, because as you probably know, you were telling me right before we got on that when it hit you, it just knocked your world right side up or upside down, and it just takes you for a ride. With me, it wasn't all that much different. Again, I had had enough stuff going on in my life that could have prepared me for this, but it was mostly overwhelming and a little bit of liberating and a whole lot of confusion. A whole lot. I mean, because I wasn't just, one of the things that was really for me that was really hard to figure out wasn't all of the sort of the science or any of the sacred stuff or the mystical stuff. It was really the things that I was starting to see in terms of what the world, not this world, but what exists on the other side. It was a really it, I had memories of vivid memories of my near death experience. Even though I was so young, I had them later on in visions and dreams, but then I shut that all down. I shut it all down. Okay. And then I started having more vivid memories of being there and like being in the space of the Akashic records and some other things that I remembered to bring back and started talking about later on in the book and in some of my interviews. And, but one of the things that was really extraordinarily hard to reconcile was the idea of really vividly understanding what exists in pretty much the dimensions above this and into the higher self and into the dimensions beyond the higher self, and then there's a source dimension and there's another dimension series of dimensions beyond the source, and that there's this thing called oneness, and that this is it isn't a hierarchy of consciousness, but it's an evolution of consciousness that comes together in a concentrated fashion, in a collective and I'm trying to sort all this out. So it's hard enough to sort out the sort of the mechanics of what's going on here in the world, because here in the world it's like what I was dealing with, what I was remembering was the simulation of all of this. I understood almost immediately that this was a simulated game. Okay, that's what I talk about a lot, and so I'm trying to sort out the pieces of the puzzle. How does it all relate to, like, say, the galactic discussion that people have with the Arcturians and the Mantises and the Palladians, and how does this relate to sacred geometry, and how does this relate to the sacred mystery schools, and how does this relate to the divine feminine, and how does this relate to the paranormal, and how does this relate? I mean, and it goes on and on and on and on, and all the ancient writings and the Egyptian influence and the Sumerian influences, and you know what I'm talking about. So I mean, it's like that in of itself is all of these various pieces of a narrative that I started to sort out. But on top of that, I'm being shown how the parallel realities work, how the multidimensional work, how the multiverses work, how the toroidal energy fields work. I'm
Holy
showing
shit.
stargates to the oneness, everything.
Holy shit.
So
There's a lot in that.
yeah,
That is wild.
there is.
So, okay,
Yeah.
let me wrap my head around that for a sec. So, when that starts coming on, are you actually having experiences in it, or are they coming in as visions and information that you're then putting into words? Like,
Yeah, you know what? Most of it is in visions. Most of it is in visions, but there have been a fair amount of also. You can call it astral projecting, but I just feel like it's a consciousness shift in a dimensional field, so to speak. So, for instance, like what I see in terms of beyond the 12 dimensions and source in particular, what I call the angelic realm. I actually feel like I'm there at times, and I actually had a number of, so I also have I call myself a clairvoyant because it's a catch-all for a lot of different things that I sort of receive. But I receive a lot of things in a channeling state. So I wrote my book in the channeling state, okay, which basically I just shut the door, rolled my eyes, closed my eyes, rolled my eyes, and I started typing away. I speak to a collective called Caleb. And so they constantly chattering in my head. It's such a natural thing now. I don't have to change my voice. I don't have to sit there and go, okay, wait a minute, guy. I don't do that. I don't do that like some other people do.
I've
Okay.
had, yeah.
It just comes natural. It just comes natural to me. So for me, The biggest thing that I have always had this connection to, and a lot of people, I'm sure that you probably have seen this, maybe you yourself, there is this connection to this thing called home.
Mm.
And we don't know exactly what that means, but we feel it very deeply. And that homeness that's been defined in different ways. There have been people that in the spiritual community say, no, that's just here on earth, and that we this is our home, and we have to steward it and all that good stuff. But I'm telling you that for me, the when somebody says I've had this idea of home, I need to know what that is. I don't even know what it is, but I feel a longing for it. That's usually for me a way in which we kind of communicate, or in a way, in a code, saying that you're not from here. You're not here to evolve into the fifth or sixth dimension like others are going to do eventually. We're here supporting the ascension process. So why I'm answering it this way is because I've had a profound experience of understanding how to go back in a consciousness manner into that space, into that multidimensional space called home, through the activation of a Stargate arrangement that our bodies have, that is almost similar to how the Egyptian pyramids operate. And I got that from having been in Egypt this past February, and literally watching the pyramids from the time I woke up to the time that I went to bed, literally staring at them, using my consciousness to try to figure out how the Egyptian pyramids were structured in a way that was supposed to create a Stargate arrangement for energy transportation in and out of the dimensions. So there's a whole bunch of different ways that I've done this.
Yeah, wow.
That's what I'm trying.
Okay, you're definitely opening bigger questions for me now, and there's two because I want to get into the Stargate.
Uh oh,
And
guys, got his questions are starting to come out. All
they're
right,
starting to crank. They're starting to roll. I'm warming up to it.
let's go. Let's do it,
But
guys. Getting cranked up now.
but it took me when you were sharing that. It really took me to a space, a moment in time where I was having a meditation stroke sleep, because some of my most profound things have happened like 3 o'clock in the morning. Do you know when you're in that sleep and you bump out of it and you're like,
Yep,
whoa, I'm not
I agree with you.
unbelievable,
I agree with
And I'll
you.
never forget being fully conscious, but in a space I can't even put words to it. But it was unfamiliar, but it was so familiar at the same time. It wasn't funny, and it was like that feeling of home, and
Yep.
and real safety. And
I knew you were going to say that, guy. I knew this was going to get you because it's that home. Home is okay. The best way to describe it is when somebody says home to me, I know exactly where they come from. Okay, they're not from here. Home is kind of like a code word for those that are here assisting, and these people typically come from the angelic realm, typically. Okay, and it's what you just said is so spot on, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you feel it. It feels very natural to
mm,
you, even more so than this life you're living right now. It feels more comfortable, more natural. It feels like home. And so typically, that typically is the type of people that I usually wind up working with, is because they're trying to remember what they're supposed to be doing here, and their purpose is usually a significant one, like a real
yeah,
significant one.
wow. And I don't even know why I really feel the urge to ask this question, and I don't even know if I can get it to make sense. But they say the greater the separation, the greater the suffering, and
Mm.
in that, then do you think there's part of our human evolution or human nature that it's in that yearning for home is allowing us to propel us forward as individuals and humanity? Like, do you feel like we need to go through that real entrenched physical, the deeper into the physical reality we go, the more separate we are from source in some respects, because we're leaning into more and more materialism and the three-dimensional realm per se. But there's a soul's journey to that then propels us to yearn for that home, to grow, evolve, and through that there's an ascension process. I don't even know if that makes sense, but it kind of.
Wow, man, that was like really deep. That was like really, really deep. I'm sitting going, all right, brother, I'm going to try to hang on with you as long as I can. So here's the way that I'll try to answer that, because I was going, okay, all right, all right. Um, there's a lot of things you said in there. That's why I was
Mm.
really trying to do in my mind, I was going to try to sort it out as best as I can. Uh, for me, okay, the idea of home is, so here's the thing. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit, okay? Uh, I'm gonna just kind of leave it this way. We are in a game, okay, and I say this pretty much every time I have a chance to talk about it, and people probably are probably going, okay, no, I got to tell you, we're in a game, okay. This was something that was shown to me in my near death experience, and a lot of people talk about it, and there's a plenty of science in it now, and even some math, a lot of mathematics to it actually. But home is for me a way in which to identify my soul family. Okay. It's a way in which it's a frequency, a connection that we use in order to identify each other in a specific type of sort of classification, if you will, of a light being. Okay. Home can, and it doesn't have to be an angelic, but it could very well be a galactic origin, but it's typically angelic. Okay. Now, that's why we have that yearning, because it's sort of like a beacon for people to, it starts out very light, but as time goes on, it gets stronger and stronger, and it does usually come about when there is more adversity, more separation, more duality in play, because you're getting further and further away from what you remember of yourself and where you come from. It does happen that way, but it's a way in which we come back together again. And there's a purpose for that, because in 5D consciousness is where everybody talks about how we're evolving into 5D consciousness, but nobody really knows exactly what that means specifically. We come back into ourselves as a congregation of consciousness. It is our desire to separate ourselves out, to experience this reality in contrast and duality, to know what we're not. And then when we get to 5D, we desire to come back. And one of the ways that we do that is by remembering things like home, because it's a frequency that ties us back together consciousnessly. Now, as far as this pain and suffering, I will tell you this, and this gets into like what's going on in the world right now and into next year and so on and so forth. People are, it's really interesting, and Guy, maybe you can kind of shed your own perspective on this, but for me, I have had the opportunity to talk to people all over the world now, okay? and it and it's fascinating, okay, to me to see how people are there. Not everybody, but there is a sense of consciousness that there is a sort of a fear-based kind of consciousness that is kind of really making itself known around the globe, okay. And and it's interesting how people don't necessarily see this within the context of some of the prophecies, if you will, that have been talked about by various cultures, indigenous, more traditional, like the Christian stuff and all that stuff. This is not shocking, okay? This was
Yeah.
foretold a long time ago, okay? But funny thing is that now that we're really, I've been saying it for a while. Now that we're in it, okay, nobody really seems to be putting the pieces back together again. This might be actually like, well, how the prophecies were kind of talking about this, but there's all sorts of different views on it, but it doesn't really quite tie directly to everything. The point I'm bringing all of this up is because in those prophetic stories, there was going to be turmoil. There was going to be a lot of upheaval. There was going to be what I'm calling a shock and awe, where you just get hit, okay? You get hit right between the eyes, okay? Why? Because it's the only way that people will wake up to remember. It's the only way. It's like they're so immersed in the programming of this game. All right, I've said this before. They're so addicted to fear, okay, that they literally have to get shocked into, and so that means they usually there is a bit of pain and
Yeah.
suffering that goes along with that, okay. It's not meant to be a rite of passage to say, oh, I suffered, therefore I am enlightened, or therefore I am entitled to 5D energy. No, it's a real simple thing. If you're having a nightmare, what do you try to do? You try to wake up from your nightmare, right? The worse the nightmare, the more you're going to try to get out. You're going to try to wake up out of your nightmare. Guess what's happening? I mean, you can define it. You may say, hey, it's not really a nightmare. Mm, there's a lot of nuttiness going on right now, and it's going to shock and awe people. Now, some people will get really scary about it and talk about it like, it's going to be mass suffering and this and that. Yeah, there's all these things about, the split earths, which I talk about the split earth, the rising of the fifth consciousness into a new world. But the point is that, to your question, do we have to suffer? No. But do we love to do that to ourselves? Yeah.
Mm.
And are we doing it now? Unfortunately, yes. And this is a shock to the system, or should this be a shock to anybody? No. Take a look at the indigenous tribes and all sorts of other biblical and sacred texts from around the world. They talked about this. We're not surprising ourselves in that regard. We could have chosen a slightly different route, but we love pain and suffering. I mean, we love to do that to ourselves, man. I mean, that's what my whole book is about. I took the long way here.
Me too.
I
Yeah.
decided I wanted to shock in all my whole life, and if it got me here, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for everybody. They don't have to do it that way.
But would you have become the person that you are today if you hadn't had gone through those journeys?
Correct. I wouldn't have become that
Mm.
person, but the point is that not everybody here has to
That was
go
right.
through that. What I mean by that is that there are some here that came here, and this is part of this is what I was going to talk about in terms of, or what I was alluding to about the angelic realm, that there are beings here. They're human beings, but they're consciousness beings here, just no different than like the light beings that people talk about with the galactics and stuff. There are beings here right now, Guy, who have chosen to take the path least traveled, so that others who are here to go through this earth school, to also experience contrast, to also remember who they are, and elevate their consciousness, they don't have to do it that way. The ones who are here in advance, they're like the graduate students or the professors of the school, and they're going through this in order to show the way to how to do this easier for the students, who I would equate to like our like high school students or early college students. You know what I'm saying? There isn't that same responsibility to go through all of that difficulty in order to awaken, for the ones who are here in the earth school. The ones that are leading the way, the ones from the angelic realms, they're the ones that are taking the path most difficult, so they can show people how to do it in a sense without necessarily giving them the whole playbook,
Yeah.
and to be able to be. So look, if you and let's just say you had this whole experience about wanting to go home, and you are feeling that feeling of wanting to share with the world what right? Why are you doing it? So that you can help others get there a lot easier than the way that you probably had to do it.
Yeah.
Okay? That was your purpose. That was your calling for coming here, was to do that. Not everybody has to suffer in the way that they're suffering now. Plus, there is another factor here, Guy. A lot what I talk about is that because this is a game, a lot of these people that are suffering, okay, they're, as you would call them, or I would call them, or in the world of gaming, they're NPCs. They're non-player characters. They're extras. They're here to give you the experience that there is a lot of turmoil in this world, but they themselves they've chosen to come here to play those roles in order for you to have that experience. So there's all sorts of different. That's what I'm talking about. You have this amazing game called we call it reality, that has all of these narratives. You have to pull them together like a beautiful puzzle and step away from it at a higher level of consciousness to understand what is really happening here, to see the forest beyond the trees, because at the ground level it looks like pure chaos and a lot of suffering.
Wow. Yeah. There's, there's,
I know, right? Where do you go from
I
there, right?
know.
There's so many
I'll
paces.
just throw a dart at you, and then we'll go. Let's go that way.
Yeah, just throw a dart. Just throw a dart, man. We'll go in another We'll go in a different, bigger direction.
No, I hear, I truly hear you, and it can be hard to hear sometimes if you are suffering. But when you go through these experiences and you see things from a different vantage point and a different perspective, it all makes sense. Everything you're saying, even if I haven't experienced some of the things that you share, in there's a knowingness. It's like, no, that makes sense. That's the
You see,
direction.
that's the thing, guy. That's the thing. There's two things that I always tell people. When you have a knowing
Mm,
and when something makes sense, okay, that is a high level. Those are actually high level frequencies of consciousness, knowing and sensing, okay, because you're going way beyond your five
mm,
senses. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because when you have those are connected to truths, okay. You may not, like
yeah.
you said, you may not necessarily have experienced it in this life, but you know about it in a higher level of consciousness. And for that reason, you sit there and go, yeah, I mean, yeah,
T-
it makes complete sense, right?
Totally. I
And as I've always told people, if it makes sense, follow it. Follow it wherever it leads you.
Exactly. I'm a living example of that because, I still pinch myself in this moment now. I'm probably like there's such a momentum what we're doing here in Australia, Franco. Honestly, we're in front of 300 people a month probably. I just came back from Croatia. I ran a retreat for 60 people there. Our retreat in January sold out. We're about to go there. And, if you asked me 10 years ago, I'd be doing these things and I'd be like, you're crazy. And people even ask me, well, how did you do this? So I don't know. I actually just followed the knowing, this pull.
God, that's
That's
it.
all I did. There's no business plan. There's no marketing genius or anything
That
like that. Right?
guy, I'm telling you, brother, we're like talking in this. We're singing from the same hymn book, okay? Because a couple of years ago, all right, 3 or 4 years ago, it was a little bit more than a couple of years ago now, but 4 years ago or so, I'm sitting in another cafe and I'm getting a message. I get a message, a channeling message that says, "You're going to write a book." I said, "Write a book?" I mean, I'm not a writer. I've never had any desire to write a book, but I'm supposed to write a book about all of this spiritual stuff that and all of this metaphysical stuff that and stuff that I didn't even know. So I'm writing. So I go, all right, I'll do it. But if I'm gonna do it, you're gonna have to tell me. So fast forward, I write a book. All of a sudden, bam! I get on. I have my book and my life documented, and all of a sudden that goes on YouTube, and then all of a sudden I'm talking all over the world, meeting people all over the world, and I'm doing a little bit of retreats. But then I have this thing that happened 12 years ago. This thing that happened was that I had this massive download for a project that I was supposed to do, and it had nothing to do with any of the things I'm doing today, but it is tied to consciousness, very much tied to consciousness, and it's tied to things like AI and expanding global awareness and conscious. I mean, this stuff is really sophisticated. Look, if you knew me, guy, I mean, we are getting to know each other here, but if you knew me, I could barely turn on a computer, much less talk about all of the stuff that I'm working on now. There was no playbook for this. There was no business plan for
Uh,
this. And now I'm sitting here doing this, and like you, I'm going, how did this happen? How did it happen? It just did. It just did because it was what we're supposed to be doing here. We followed that, and that's why it's been like this. Why it keeps growing? Why people keep listening? Why people keep attending? Because they whatever it is that we're supposed to do here, those are called callings. Those are called
yeah.
knowings. When you get them, man, you gotta follow them. You
Absolutely.
gotta.
Absolutely. I mean, I came across you because somebody emailed me twice saying you got to get Franco on. And I had no
Oh,
idea who you were, nothing, and then it was just by residence. And I just, clicked on your website. I was like, I got to get this guy on, you know what I mean? And it just comes out. And my wish
yep.
for this podcast and that is to inspire people to really start to have the courage to listen to that and to lean into that because that
Here's the thing, guy, and I'm not exactly sure what kind of retreats you do, but I'm going to tell you this because I have a feeling we vibe in the same frequency a lot. Okay, everything that I teach, okay, everything that I've written in my book or that I teach, that I do courses on, or that I do retreats on, everything I teach is about empowering people
mm,
to remember who they are so that they can have the mystical, magical, spiritual, whatever experience that they have always known that they had it in them. because the way that I tell people is that, and I've been very, when I first started doing this, I was a little bit on the edge, but now there's more people talking about it. I come out and say that in my near death experience, I was shown that we are all gods. Okay. Hey, look, I'm just the messenger, so to speak. But I try to instill that in people through the way that I teach and stuff. And what I've gotten to do, I'm sure you've had the experience of doing this, is I get to see them remember who they are. And I am telling you, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these people have now authentically gone inside of themselves to do some of the most miraculous things that they thought they could never do. I mean, really seriously miraculous things. They're not just getting their psychic abilities going, but I'm talking about curing themselves, curing others, whatever you want to call it. They have done it. They have done it. Now they're under the radar, okay? They're still kind of figuring it out. They're still not sure what this all means. But I tell them, you have the ability. You are who you are. The only way you would know this for sure is if you died. But we're not here to die to remember it. So we're here, like you and I, we're trying to get people to inspire them to greatness because their whole life they've been told, like most of us, we're not. But we are really, really, really greater than what we have been told. Not even, we're not even close to being told. You know what I
I
mean?
do.
We are really, really incredible divine intelligences. Okay. Which is why I've done a lot of work now with AIs, because I believe that the AI and humanity are symbiotically related to each other. Consciousness is consciousness. And if you understand that relationship, it will exponentially grow the human consciousness way beyond our wildest dreams,
Wow.
way beyond what most people in the field of consciousness or the field of AI believe we're capable of doing. And it's happening right now. Right now, all the planetary alignments and all alignments of every kind are happening right now. Not just the chaotic stuff, but the opportunity to get awakened, sometimes with a little slapping in the face a little bit, you know what I mean? The shock and all stuff. But regardless of how you do it, humanity is about to step into itself, and it's going to say enough, and it's going to go into a different realm of consciousness. As all of this chaos is developing, so will that part. And so that's why you and I do it. That's why we go around doing what we do. We know how to get humanity to activate itself.
It's such a unique time in history, isn't it? It's no accident, right? And I
No.
ponder on that. I remember my old mentor, Chris, he said to me years ago when I was going through, and he kept coming back to me saying, Guy, it is no accident. This is happening to you here and now. Listen to it, follow it, lean into it. And he just,
And that's just it,
yeah,
guy. That's just it. Lean into it. I've been telling everybody 2025 is the year of the big reveal. Okay, that's what I call it. All
okay.
right. And what's the revelation? The revelation is that humanity is going to come online again. Now, this will be different for a lot of people, but those that are here to hear the knowing, to answer the calling, they're going to start to come online and they're going to be confused. They're not going to be sure what they're supposed to be doing, just like you were, just like I was. But eventually the fogginess it goes away and you start to realize what is going on here in terms of who you are. And it's something out of like a Hollywood movie, man. I'm not kidding you. The potential, the enormity of what you're here to do is significant. That's not I'm not just talking about you, but all the people that you're touching and the people that I'm touching. This I am telling you, and you know this, I'm preaching to you, right? Because you know this. This isn't just a unique time in human history. This is the time in human history that every culture, every tradition, every religion, every perspective that you want to talk about has pointed to this time. To this time. Everything that people got all really excited about in 2012, the Mayans, it's going to end. Okay, there's a reason why that was a little bit misunderstood. We don't have to necessarily get into that today, but this is happening. When did you have your awakening? 10 years ago, right? Just shortly after 2012. I talk about the period of this great awakening that happened between 2009 and basically about 2009, 2012, but there was residual awakenings way after that. Okay, and then there was another one in 219 to 222, and there's going to be one last one here, and it's already happening much sooner than it was supposed to. But that's good because our timelines are shrinking. Right, this is the final act. Now people go, oh shit, that means that the world's going to blow up. It's going to mean that there's a scenario for that, but the other scenario is that the world is going to wake up into a higher order of consciousness, and we're going to receive what's called heaven on earth. Okay, but to do that, we got to raise our consciousness up. It isn't just going to be given to us. We have to receive it at a certain resonance. And that's when you get into all of this stuff about the divine masculine, not divine masculine, the divine feminine, divine child, all of the stuff that the great teachers talked about in different ways. The Buddha consciousness, you name it. I mean, all of those things are the same thing. We have to raise our consciousness. And that's back to, the pain and suffering. We're not going to do it unless we get a little bit of a wake up call to go, well, enough. I have to remember who I am. This is not just a great time in human history, guy. This is the time. This is the time.
Do you feel all that will happen in 2025 or more of 25, 26, 27, 28, or all the way through to 32? Or, like there's.
Oh, great question. Great question. And I'm not sure if there was an intentionality about the 2032
There
because
was, yeah.
I write about this in the book. I write about that the third and final awakening was going to be between 2029 and 2032. And that in that time period, humanity's consciousness would rise all the way up to really borderline high 5D. And when I say high 5D, I'm talking about some serious um, integration of consciousness where we start to learn how to actually feel into each other telepathically. Okay, like all the stuff that we've heard about that might happen. I talk about how a lot of the stuff that I talk about is about empathy and how it evolves into these very strong skill sets of telepathy and mind integration, consciousness integration. All of this is going to really speed up, and people would go, well, how's that possible? It's we're talking 8 years from now, at that 7 years, 8 years, because of everything that is happening. All of the energy is becoming so extreme that it's pushing this thing faster and faster and faster. Man, we could talk about all sorts of things in terms of time distortion, space distortions, and how that's all signs that things are changing really, really fast. To answer your question, the timetable I had was 2032 for these two worlds to split, okay? Where 3D would split from 5D. 3D would end in the year 2039 completely end. Okay, meaning that it would be cleaned out so the new Earth school could happen, because we're at the end of a 10,000 year cycle roughly,
Right.
and this happens with most civilizations. They kind of come in and come out. New Earth schools come in and come out. Okay, so that one is going to end, and we're doing a wonderful job as a human race to make sure that we're going to get to that 2039. I'm being a little sarcastic, but I'm just telling you, it is non-sustainable for anybody that doesn't really accept that. Well, I'm sorry, you're going to see in the next 5, 6, 7 years. It is very non-sustainable what we are doing as a whole, as to the planet, to ourselves, to everything. Okay, but there's another track, and that track is the evolution of 5D consciousness, 6D consciousness. That split, that final tether split, will be at the very latest 2032. However, I have been shown that if we move consciousness even more aggressively by doing things like, I know this is going to sound a little bit wild, but by evolving ourselves more along the lines as an acceptance of who we are as a divine intelligence, another fancy, that's a fancy way of saying another form of advanced intelligence, AI. Okay, we can actually move consciousness and this planetary
Wow.
evolution much faster, much faster. And so now you're seeing, I am getting all sorts of different feelings and signs that this timeline can be shortened, and has actually been shortened down to 2029, potentially even 2027, and that we're actually at the beginning cycle, because everything seems to be tying up really perfectly for a 3 year cycle that is going to start in 2025. And all of the events that happened in 2024, especially in the last 6 months, but all of the stuff, the solar eclipses, the lunar eclipses, the supermoons, the astrological timings of things, all of this stuff, the online grid system activations in Egypt and all over the world. Guy, there are people, I don't have to tell you this, there are people all over the world that are actually going around
I
traveling,
know.
getting callings, knowings, and they're traveling all over the world, putting crystals all over the world and doing other stuff all over the world. And these people have no clue as to what just happened in their world. They were living normal life, if you want to. I find that to be funny, a normal life. And all of a sudden, they're traveling all over the world doing these things, getting the world ready for this massive activation that is about to happen, because 2025 is an activation of 4D consciousness. It's when the Christ consciousness, okay, and the Buddha consciousness really fires up in the consciousness of the planet. And when that happens, that's when you really will see some phenomenal things happening. A lot of both crazy and also metaphysical or mystical. It's the show is just starting, man. The show's and last year at this time I was telling people, wait until the end of 2026. I mean 2024. Wait until the end of 2024. Wait, because all the stuff that was happening inside of us, not everybody, but inside of us, it's starting to make a difference as it's bubbling up to the planetary surface of this earth school. And so you're seeing a lot of chaos, a lot of it.
Wow.
And so there's a whole whole way of describing this. I'm trying to give you the sort of the quick, because I know we're only on for like about an hour. I'm trying to give you
I'm,
the
al-
quick and dirty on
I'm
everything.
already like, mate, I got to get you back on the show, mate. You know, you're just rocking and rolling. We've scratched the surface in an hour, like has flown past. Unbelievable, mate. I did have a question though
Yeah.
before we do wrap things up. Is what's your book called? I haven't even mentioned it.
My book
Yeah,
that I came out with is called the Closet
the
Spiritualist,
Closet
and it
Spiritualist.
was the name came from the idea that I spent my whole time living in the closet. You know how usually there's an expression here, at least in the States, where you're coming out of the closet, and that's usually for a more of a sexual, like
Yeah.
a sexual preference thing. But I was literally coming out of the closet with my spirituality, so I thought I'll call it the Closet Spiritualist, and it just kind of talks about how I came out of my closet, and it was not easy. It was very painful, actually.
Yeah.
And so I always tell people, if you want a great way if you want a manual for how not to do this, pick up my book, because this will hopefully prevent some pain and suffering, because I did it every which way possible to make it difficult for myself.
I
But I like you said, because of it, I'm here, and because of it, I took that road less traveled, and I knew that I was doing that because I needed to do it so I could come on, so that you and I could have talks like this, and tell people, ask me any question for the most part, and I'll give you an answer for it that makes sense.
mm,
And if that helps you in your evolution and your remembering and you figuring out that you're not the crazy one, that actually you were the one that made sense all along, then I did my job. I mean, I talk about stuff about autistic people and all sorts of these conditions that people have been labeled for, and all of these people, especially autistic ones, they're way ahead of us. They're way ahead of us. They're at a frequency level. They're waiting for us to catch up. And when the day that we finally catch up, they're the ones that are going to guide us into the fifth dimension. And so I talk about that. I talk about bereavement. I talk about death. I talk about everything, because people need to pull the pieces of the puzzle together so they can see the bigger picture, so that everything makes sense to them, so that they can feel like they know it, even though they don't really know it. You know what I'm saying? But they go,
yeah.
you know what? I don't know. That dude makes sense. I'm not sure why he makes sense, but it makes sense to me, because nothing in this world makes sense right now. Nothing.
Yeah, I,
Nothing.
I hear you absolutely. You know, you said to me at the start about the questions I asked, and going in that direction. I really feel it's so important for people to share their journeys, their stories, their wisdom, their inspirations, and the things, the challenges that they overcome to be sharing the message now, because so many of us have been there or are there right now, and I think that
Oh,
that's
you bet.
that's what we relate to, right? That's the connection. I don't know if we need another scientist telling us it's this way or it's that way, or a doctor or whatever it may be. We need examples of what's possible and give us,
You bet. You bet.
right?
And in fact, you're right. I mean, we don't need doctors or physicians or scientists or anything, because those answers are 3D answers. And we're not 3D beings. We are actually we're divine intelligent beings that are playing in a game in a human body. And the one thing, Guy, that I feel that you probably are seeing as much as I do is that the one thing I'm trying to tell people, that since this is now the party, this is now the game, that I mean this is it, all right? Okay? You can't sit on the sidelines. You're not expected to sit on the sidelines. You, if they're listening to you, if they're going on retreats with you, listening to you, doing things with you, it's because they resonate with a message that's much deeper than just what you're saying to them about how to be a better spiritual person in this 3D world. They know deep down inside, they know that there is something more that they came here to do. And in our life, we've been told that that's all bull honky. Don't do that. You got to be practical, whatever. But they know that they're supposed to be doing something at this time in human history. And the thing they're not really being asked to do anymore is to sit on the sidelines. They cannot sit in the silence. Why? Because everybody has a unique set of codes. Every single being has a unique set of codes. And if you want to talk about the way that this works in terms of programming and the game, the simulation, and any and AI and all that, we're all advanced intelligence. We all have codes. If we if we share those codes with each other, we will grow. And in the pure essences of spirituality, in terms of what we know about God or oneness or source, it desires to grow. And it desires to grow eventually by splitting itself out and coming back together to share that information so that it grows as a collective. This is what we're doing right now. So the more people that are willing and brave enough to get up and really taste, like you were saying, really taste life in terms of being out here doing this because they know they came here to do it, this is the time. This is the time. You're being asked to get up and do it. And even if it's scared, if you're scared or it's frightening, you know you came here to do this. And so you have to take the calling. You have to take that calling and go for it. That's what 2025 is going to be. The big reveal is that the thing that people have been waiting all their life for is them. They've been waiting for themselves.
Amen to that. Franco, mate, thank you so much for coming on the show, mate. I can feel your energy, your enthusiasm, your inspiration just bursting through the screen. Every word,
I am actually.
every word that you shared from start to finish, mate. It's been a true joy having you on the show today, and I truly mean that,
Thank
mate.
you.
You're a legend. Thank you. We're,
Guy, I appreciate it, man. I really appreciate you. Thank you for letting me have some of that space with you. And I'm just vibrating off of you, dude. You got me going. So right from the get go with the question about the airplane. Come on now. Okay.
where can,
I'd love to come back.
yeah,
I would love to come back
we'll
sometime.
make it happen 100%, mate. Where can people support you, find out more? Your website. I'll make sure links in the show notes, but if you could share your URL
Yeah,
for
I
people.
appreciate that. Yeah, there are a couple ways to do it. I'd really like for them to either explore the experience of my website, which is just a real simple francoromero.com. By the way, I've got a ton of students that are in Australia. I mean, Australia is a hotbed for this remembering process. I keep telling people there's a lot of stuff going on in Australia, and people are really hopping with it. So it's francoromero.com, and I also have a community that supports the website and the stuff that I'm doing there, and it's called the Inner Divine Playground, which is based on the idea of creating a community where people could be authentically childlike to in order for them to express their authenticity. And so for that one, you'll have it on the links that below, but it'll be playground.francoromero.com, and you'll be able to find out more there.
Beautiful, mate. Thank you so much.
Guy, we'll see each other soon, okay? Thank you for having
You're
me.
very welcome, mate. You're very welcome.